She didn't even try to hide it. The anger was there in the way her voice cut through the air like glass shattering on stone. "You'll never last here." It wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. The yellow gloves in Naen's hands slipped to the marble floor, the sound swallowed by the sheer size of the room. A mop bucket tipped in the corner, sending water creeping across the polished tiles toward a rug worth more than most people's annual salary. Standing across from her was Isabelle, the millionaire's new wife, eyes sharp and unblinking, the kind of stare that dared you to flinch first. For years, every maid who entered this house had left within days. Some by choice, most not. 3 days was the record. No one survived longer. No one. Until now. Naen didn't move, didn't break eye contact. She wasn't here to bow, and she wasn't here to please. She had stepped into this mansion with a purpose so unshakable it would either keep her standing when the dust settled, or destroy her completely. And before this was over, Isabelle Riker would learn that some women cannot be broken. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Who was Isabelle Riker, really? To the outside world, she was the elegant young wife of a wealthy man, always draped in silk, her smile sharp enough to pass for charm. But to those who worked inside the mansion on Willow Lane, she was something else entirely. A force that cleared hallways, silenced rooms, and sent more than a dozen maids packing in less than a year. Why had every maid before Naen quit or been fired in just a matter of days? What was it about this place, or about Isabelle herself, that made staying impossible? And then there was Naen, quiet, steady, unshaken in the face of the very temper that had broken everyone else. What secret did she carry that made her willing to endure what no one else would? And what exactly happened inside the Riker mansion one stormy night that no one, least of all Isabelle, would ever forget? The Riker mansion on Willow Lane was the kind of place people slowed down to stare at when they drove past. 12 cars could fit in the garage, the garden stretched farther than the eye could follow, and the walls had heard more laughter during champagne-soaked parties than most neighborhoods heard in a year. But the same locals who admired its beauty also lowered their voices when speaking of it. They whispered it was cursed, at least for the staff who worked within. Malcolm Riker, the man who owned it all, was 62, silver-haired, and the product of old money. In the city, he was known as a generous donor to charities and cultural causes. Yet those who had met him behind closed doors spoke of a man who kept his heart locked away, as private as the vault in his study. His new wife, Isabelle Riker, was barely in her 30s, strikingly tall, her blonde hair and polished posture making her look as though she stepped from the pages of a magazine. She dressed as if every outfit were armor, and to the public she was poised and refined. But to those who worked for her, she was a different kind of presence, one that commanded obedience through sharp words and sharper silences. And then there was Naen. 38, widowed, the mother of an 8-year-old boy named Jamal, who had never spoken a word. Jamal needed therapy that stretched far beyond what Naen could afford, but she had been raising him alone for years, carrying the weight without complaint. Her hands were worn from decades of cleaning work, but her eyes missed nothing. Tough, observant, fiercely protective, Naen had learned the kind of patience that could outlast storms. Yet even for someone like her, stepping into the Riker mansion was a gamble. The stories about maids leaving in tears were not rumors. They were history. In a flashback, we see them. A young woman walking down the driveway with a torn uniform, another stuffing her belongings into a taxi before dawn. And then, on a rainy morning, Naen receiving the call. The job was hers. She stood at her small kitchen table, clutching a faded photograph of Jamal in one hand and the phone in the other, knowing that this position could either save them or ruin them. Naen's first day inside the Riker mansion began long before the sun touched the gardens. The marble floors seemed colder that morning, the chandeliers brighter, almost blinding in their reflection. She was met not with welcomes but with glances, quick, sharp looks from the other staff that carried unspoken warnings. A butler passed her in the hallway without a word, his eyes darting toward the grand staircase before turning away. In the kitchen, a maid washing silver shook her head ever so slightly when Naen entered, as if to say, "You'll see for yourself soon enough." It didn't take long. Isabelle Riker appeared before breakfast, dressed in a pale silk robe that somehow looked as formal as an evening gown. She didn't greet Naen. Instead, she began to list the rules in a voice that was calm but edged with something harder. No eye contact unless addressed. No speaking unless spoken to. Every garment to be pressed daily. No wrinkles, not a single crease out of place. Meals to be served at the precise minute requested. Never before. Never after. Naen listened without blinking, her hands clasped in front of her, but her mind was already working. As she moved through the house that day, she noticed details others might overlook. Small black domes mounted high in the corners of rooms, hidden security cameras, 2 doors along the east corridor that were always locked, the brass handles polished but never touched. Isabelle wasted no time in testing her. At lunch, she accidentally knocked over a glass of red wine, the dark stain spreading across a tablecloth so fine it could have been spun from air. Later, she left a list of cleaning tasks that defied reason. Polishing every crystal in the chandelier by hand before sunset, despite it hanging 12 feet from the floor. Naen completed each one without complaint, though she kept her eyes open for what the others had missed. Then, near the end of that long first day, as she passed the half-closed door of the study, she heard it. Isabelle's voice, low and deliberate, speaking into the phone. "We need to remove the problem before Malcolm returns." The words hung in the air like a warning bell, and Naen stopped just short of the doorway, her breath held. She didn't know yet what the problem was, but she knew one thing. It wasn't going to remove itself. It didn't happen overnight. But Naen's precision began to draw Malcolm Riker's attention. The silverware gleamed, the linens were immaculate, and the schedules ran without a second's delay. He rarely spoke more than a few words to the staff, but on more than one occasion, Naen caught him watching her work with the faintest trace of approval. In a house where most came and went like ghosts, that was something. Slowly, the other staff began to open up. Over quiet cups of tea in the kitchen or hushed conversations in the laundry room, they told her what they had seen. Isabelle Riker's temper wasn't just reserved for the maids. She had humiliated the gardener for leaving a single leaf on the walkway, reduced the cook to tears over a misplaced spice jar, and once ordered a driver to sleep in his car for arriving 5 minutes late. But there were whispers of something else. Something beyond cruelty. One housekeeper hinted that Isabelle was moving money without Malcolm's knowledge. Another swore she had seen Isabelle lock a small black case in the study's desk. Naen kept her expression neutral, but she was listening. One afternoon, while Isabelle was out, Naen entered the study under the pretext of dusting. That's when she found it. A ledger tucked inside the bottom drawer, half buried under old magazines. Inside were pages lined with names, dates, and amounts that didn't match anything in the household accounts. Offshore bank numbers were written in the margins. Naen didn't know exactly what it all meant yet, but she knew it was something Malcolm hadn't seen. She began to document everything, quietly snapping photographs with her phone when no one was around, recording short voice memos describing where she had found each clue. But with every step she took, she felt the tension in the air tighten. Isabelle's gaze lingered longer when their paths crossed. Her questions about Naen's work grew sharper, less casual. Then, one morning, a distraction. Isabelle accused another maid of stealing an antique brooch. The accusation was loud enough to draw Malcolm from his study, and to Naen's surprise, he seemed to side with Isabelle. But as he turned away, his eyes met Naen's for just a fraction of a second. She couldn't tell if it was a warning, or if Malcolm Riker was quietly testing her. The pieces began to fit together late one night when Naen spread the photographs she had taken across the small table in her room. The ledger she had found wasn't just a list of numbers, it was a map of theft. Every date, every transfer matched records from Malcolm Riker's charitable foundation, money that should have gone to schools, hospitals, and community projects. Instead, the funds had been siphoned into offshore accounts under names Naen didn't recognize, but were tied to shell companies Isabelle Riker controlled. And then she found something worse. Tucked between pages of the ledger were copies of legal documents, property transfers for several of Malcolm's smaller real estate holdings. His signature was there in black ink, but when Naen compared it to other documents she had seen, it was wrong. The angle of the letters, the pressure of the pen, it was a forgery. Isabelle Riker had been moving pieces on the board long before Naen ever arrived, and the pattern was deliberate. The cruelty toward the maids, the impossible rules, the constant surveillance. It was never about incompetence or arrogance. It was strategy. Drive out every employee before they got close enough to see what she was really doing. Naen sat back in her chair, the weight of it pressing into her chest. She had a choice now, and either path carried risk. Confronting Isabelle directly would put her in immediate danger. Isabelle's reach extended far beyond the walls of the mansion, but waiting too long to act could give Isabelle the chance to erase the evidence completely. There was no one Naen could trust except perhaps Malcolm himself, and even then, she couldn't be certain which side he truly stood on. She folded the photographs carefully, tucking them inside the lining of her bag, and stared at the locked door of her room. Somewhere in the mansion, Isabelle was still awake, and Naen knew that if she made one wrong move, she might become just another name whispered about by the staff who never lasted. The plan had been forming in Naen's mind for days, each piece slipping into place with the care of someone who understood that one wrong move could undo everything. The opportunity came on the night of a formal dinner at the Riker mansion, when Malcolm Riker's closest business associates gathered under the glitter of the chandelier. The air was thick with expensive cologne, soft music, and the quiet clink of cutlery on fine china. Isabelle Riker sat at the head of the table, flawless in an emerald gown, her diamonds catching every flicker of candlelight. Her voice floated easily through the room, charming guests who had no idea how different she sounded when no one was watching. Naen moved among them with the silent grace of someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once. She poured wine, refilled glasses, and waited. Then, when the moment was right, her hand tipped just a little too far. The bottle tilted, and a stream of red spilled across the tablecloth and down onto Isabelle's lap. Gasps rose like a wave, the bright stain blooming across the silk of her gown. Isabelle's eyes narrowed, but with the eyes of the room upon her, she forced a thin smile and excused herself, heels clicking sharply against the marble as she disappeared upstairs. Naen wasted no time. She slipped from the dining room, her path swift and sure, until she stood in Malcolm's study. From the pocket of her apron she drew the ledger, worn edges, ink smudged from her fingers, and set it open on the desk where it could not be missed. The incriminating pages were stacked on top, every damning figure in plain sight. Without hesitation, she stepped back into the hallway and returned to her duties before Isabelle's perfume could drift back into the room. Later, Malcolm entered the dining room again. He was composed, but Naen saw it, the subtle change in his posture, the heaviness in his gaze. After the guests had left, the house fell into a deep, heavy silence. In the study, the confrontation unfolded. Isabelle denied everything, her words quick and biting, twisting the truth to frame Naen. She accused her of theft, of conspiracy, of betrayal. But Malcolm did not look away from her, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. Isabelle would leave that night. There would be no police, no public scandal. He would not tarnish the family name, but she would take nothing with her. The next morning, the mansion seemed almost hollow. Isabelle's heels no longer echoed in the halls. Her orders no longer cracked through the air. Malcolm called Naen into the study, thanked her in his own reserved way, and told her she would remain in the household permanently. More than that, he would pay for all of Jamal's therapy, whatever it cost. That evening, Naen returned home to the small apartment she shared with her son. Jamal was already in bed, his favorite blanket pulled halfway up. She tucked it under his chin and rested her hand against his cheek, letting the moment settle. The mansion, the ledger, The silent battles fought in its corridors. They were behind her now. She had won, not with rage, but with resolve. And in the quiet of that room, with her son safe in her arms, Naen knew she had done the impossible. Sometimes survival isn't about strength alone. It's about knowing when to wait, when to watch, and when to act. Naen understood that in a way most people never will. She stood in a place where every move could have been her last, where one misstep could have cost her the only chance she had to give her son a better life. And she didn't just survive, she changed the course of her own story. If you were in Naen's position, would you have risked everything to expose Isabelle Riker? Would you have taken the chance, knowing that one wrong step could leave you with nothing? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.